Hi, this is Dee Kayalar, Assistant Director of Alumni Career Engagement. Welcome to Alumni Zoom Trips, our virtual webcast series with USD alumni experts about how to navigate the long-term impact of COVID-19 on our communities and workplaces. The program is co-hosted with the Office of Alumni Relations. Fagoaga joins us from Seattle, where he just joined Amazon in the role of Business Financial Analyst. He holds a master's in supply chain management from USD and has previously worked in Boeing for over a decade, serving in various operations and finance roles. Frank, you and I first met in Seattle just over a year ago when you graciously hosted our Tara Trek students visiting the Boeing headquarters there and the popular Everett factory. And so much has changed since that day. Currently, Boeing is facing a historical challenge, having endured fatal crashes and needing to streamline operations through cost-saving measures, including layoffs, which sadly has also impacted you. So can you tell us your experience navigating this post-COVID job market?
Well, so initially, when I received the layoff notice from Boeing, it was kind of a shock. I didn't even know how to react initially, let alone being prepared for it. And I didn't even know if I could move around internally. I tried to move around internally, and that opportunity wasn't readily available to me. So I knew that the writing was on the wall. I needed to explore externally. At the time, I wasn't sure, which companies to consider. I had reached out to some friends that I knew at Microsoft and, other local companies like Expedia, and just to figure out like where they were in terms of hiring. I learned that Microsoft and Expedia were going through some restructuring activities, and Boeing wasn't the only one. So I knew that my opportunities at other companies was going to be somewhat limited. That was my initial assumption. However, after talking to a colleague internally within Boeing that was retiring, he said that he took a voluntary layoff to save somebody's job. He told me to talk to his son, and that kind of sort of started the conversation with Amazon. It really wasn't something I had thought of, wasn't really considering Amazon at the time. And, just that network from the get-go really kind of started the ball rolling. Started my conversations with Amazon around June. Prior to that, I know I had reached out to USD and the business school, talked to you as well, Dee, just to get some advice on what to do, how to get my resume ready for sharing with other companies, and what sort of resources are available to alumni that are encountering possibility of layoffs or career changes. So started there. The recruiters immediately, offered a couple of roles. They said, if you're interested, we'll start the conversation, set up the meetings. But from the get-go, a lot of it was just doing research on Amazon, what their culture is like. Do I see myself fitting in? And lucky for me, having worked at a aerospace company as big as Boeing and being in procurement, that department really enabled me to develop a thick skin and be able to work with a diverse amount of people. That correlated very well with the position that I was interviewing for. And, I really had to think about, all of the experiences I've had over the years, and how do those experiences align with Amazon's 14 leadership principles. That was key for me. Definitely a lot of studying, but that's what really kind of set it off for me. And just having people giving me positive advice along the way really went very far for me, because I felt like I was going to be jobless for a while. I mean, I was prepared, financially. So at the time, I think I would have been okay. But, with wedding planning, that really kind of set off a lot of red alarms for my fiance. And so I really had to put a lot of effort after work to apply for jobs. And, Amazon was the only one that really drew my attention because I felt like they
Mhm.
were the ones that were growing the fastest in the region.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I hear a lot of things. Obviously, the shock factor
Mhm,
is very
mhm,
discouraging for this to have come to you
mhm,
when you least expected it. But also, despite that, you being able to lean on your support network, reaching out to your USD networks, but also researching what's available out there and looking at who you can get that support from within Boeing as well, and talking to your mentors.
mhm.
So against that background, what would your advice be for those currently experiencing job loss?
So I would say the biggest advice I could give them is don't burn any bridges. You know, Oftentimes a lot of people that you've worked with in the past, recruiters tend to reach out to those folks just to kind of see how you are as an individual. Are you a good employee? I know that's happened to me before where I've had to recommend somebody via LinkedIn. So definitely having a pretty active network, and just maintain that network by setting up meetings with them just to kind of talk, not necessarily because you want something from them, but it's more about just learning about how they got to where they are today. If they were in your shoes, like, what are some of the steps that they would take. um, and it's more just mentoring. It's not so much about what they can do for you, but you just getting that advice. So that was very helpful for me. um, Having a good support system like my family, that was very helpful for me. My fiance being there for me, and um, as well as just trying to leave Boeing on good terms. I know it can be very easy to be a disgruntled employee, and not fulfill your duties while you're still employed with an employer that's trying to lay you off. So I felt like it was my duty to kind of leave in good terms, while trying to transition. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah, and not really take it personally. Right.
mhm,
Okay. And knowing that you may have to rely on those connections into the
mhm,
future as well. Right. And keeping that network active and really reaching out to people for advice and information.
mhm.
And in terms of your job strategy, so networking apparently worked. Were there anything that didn't work in terms of things that you've tried out that didn't really bear fruit?
So I know within LinkedIn they have a feature where you can upgrade your profile. It allows you to kind of email recruiters. I tried that out. Wasn't as successful as, like a personal referral from a friend at a company. I applied to roles within LinkedIn. I didn't get a lot of hits. So that in a way for me was kind of discouraging in a way. And so I felt like my biggest support system there was going to be just leveraging that network I had worked years to build, and then just leaning on those folks. I reached out to some friends that work at McKinsey, and they have a lot of experience in different industries. And this person was very helpful to me, kind of told me some things to keep in mind, gave me resume tips, gave me interview tips, because those folks know what sort of skills they're seeking, especially in a management consulting company that deals with various industries. They're very particular about the skill set and the mindset you need to have. And so he gave me that insight that allowed me to to do well in my interviews at Amazon.
That's very helpful to know. Thank you for sharing that. And should people be considering a career change during this time? And if so, what would your advice be for successfully navigating a career pivot?
I mean, I would say always keep your options open. I know at Boeing, my options were pretty limited, given, the department I was in. Um, if you feel like your career is stagnant, definitely put feelers out there just to practice interviewing skills, get to know different companies, improve on those interview skills. So that way, when you do find the role that you want, you'll know exactly what you could improve on, and do better. I would say, keep your LinkedIn active. Um, that in itself helped me a lot, and just setting up meetings with people on a recurring basis, just to kind of talk about current events, to talk about careers, because I have found that folks that are not necessarily looking for a job, um, will be offered opportunities, when you least expect it. And so, or if you are actively looking, those individuals that you're talking to may know somebody in the industry that you're interested in, and they could help open a door for you.
Absolutely. And how would you advise job seekers to best explain a career change due to the pandemic in an interview or in their cover letters?
Repeat the question one more time.
Yeah. So how can job seekers best explain a career shift because of the pandemic during an interview or in a cover letter, right? If they have
I mean, I
lost
would,
their jobs or if they are thinking of pivoting to a completely different sector, industry, career track, what would be the best, because of the COVID, what would be the best way for them to explain that?
I mean, for me, I would just say, just be honest.
Mhm.
Honesty goes a long way. And I mean, Amazon did ask me that question, from the very beginning, why Amazon? And I told them that I had been thinking about transitioning to the technology sector for quite some time. Um, I told them I had reached a point in my career at Boeing where I felt like I wasn't growing and I needed to come to, a more dynamic industry that is booming. And I said I felt like, given at the speed that Amazon is moving and my analytical skills and procurement background, I felt like there was a lot of value I could bring to the table. And so they didn't really question me too much on that.
Mhm.
I felt like my honesty definitely went a long way there.
Mhm.
If there's a significant gap, from your prior role to the new one you're about to obtain, I would just say, just disclose it and just explain what happened. Oftentimes there are things that are out of our control, and I think if the hiring managers are able to see that, you know, you got laid off, they will be a lot more understanding of the current situation that's in there, that's been happening.
Absolutely. And what resources would you recommend for those looking to start their careers? And can you also talk about, sort of speak to the role of USD's career
Oh,
resources for those students and alumni?
oh, definitely. So for me, USD was very an important resource that I leveraged from day one, in part because it allowed me to kind of have somebody to talk to, that has probably dealt with something similar to me. And at the time when I reached out to USD, I wasn't really sure about what sort of resources are available to alumni. And I was happy to learn that there was a lot more than I thought, in terms of, resume preparation, interview skills. How do you negotiate your salary? Those are things that I've never really had to do before. I didn't even know you could do that, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I've read about it, but I've never actually had to do it. And when I was dealing with Amazon, a lot of the key pieces of advice I got from the USD Alumni Career Services was very important because it allowed my resume to stand out more, and I was able to prep for an interview much more confidently. Um, it basically gave my friend that was helping me practice questions to ask me, and then he would give me instant feedback on how I can improve answering those questions. And when it came to negotiating a salary, I mean that was a big one. I mean I declined their first offer, and I thought I was like, oh, what
Did
did
I
I
do the
just?
right thing?
I was like,
What
what
did
did
I
I
do
just?
here?
I was like, what did I just do? Well, I didn't say no. I mean, all
Mhm.
I asked were, flexibility in certain areas. I
Mhm.
didn't say, I want this much more. I said, can we go up in this area, maybe a little bit more vacation? And they
Yeah,
came, and they came back a little bit stronger in the second offer. And, at that point, I knew that, while being in a pandemic and a company that countered the original offer made me believe that they really wanted me. So,
sure. I'm actually, I'm sure our listeners are too. I'm very curious about your experience applying and interviewing with Amazon specifically. So, can you talk to us about like what that process looked like from start to finish for you, and
sure.
like how you mentioned you found out about the position from your friend, but
Mhm.
like were you contacted by recruiters? How did you get called in for an interview? How many interviews did it take before you received the offer?
Sure.
Yeah, the whole gamut.
Okay, so the way it kind of worked out for me is before applying, I, kind of talked to some people that work at the company, and I asked, what is the best way to get noticed? Because oftentimes when you do a resume and you don't use a lot of buzzwords, you tend not to get past certain filters, and so I knew that I didn't have a lot of time, and so I had some friends recommend me to a couple of job roles. I mean, there were some pretty high level roles, areas that I hadn't really done before. So I figured, why not? The company basically said I was no longer under consideration for those roles, but they came back with the offer that of this new job in data analytics. And
Mhm.
they said, what is your interest level in this role? If you're interested, we'll set up the meetings and kind of go from there. So I was like, yeah, there's like this role, closely aligns with what I've done in the past, minus the data analytics component, but let's give it a shot and see what happens. So the initial phone call was about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. This is just an exploratory call just to kind of see if you're a good fit for the team. They ask you a few behavioral questions, answering in the STAR method. Um, and after that, you really don't hear much for like a week or two. And so you don't know if you did well, or, they
Mhm.
want to continue the discussion. And so when they came back at me for setting up a second interview, I was like, wow, okay, so the hiring manager wants to talk to me. Okay, what do I need to do to prep for this? And one of my strategies for interviewing with Amazon is I tried to space out my interviews to give me enough study time.
Mhm.
And one of the strategies that I employed was having enough examples around the different leadership principles. So there's 14 of them, and I basically had about 2 or 3 examples for each one, just to have a diversity in my responses.
And what
Um,
are some of those leadership principles, Frank?
uh, there's like our right a lot. Uh,
Mhm.
there's a customer obsession. is one of the principles. Having a backbone, earning trust.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could list them,
Sure.
but those are some of the key ones that they sort of quizzed me on.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on the group that you're on.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, during the second interview, go ahead.
Did they give you a prompt prior to the interview?
Yeah, they usually they ask you a question that aligns with that leadership principle, and they have you describe a situation where you know you had a difficult customer. You know, how did you go about dealing with that person, and
Mm-hmm.
what did you do to overcome the obstacle? You know, there's so many questions that they ask, to be honest with you, like you don't even know where they're going to come from. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, you know, just really like studying up on the principles, reading articles about types of questions that they could ask you was helpful.
And did you meet with a panel of interviewers, or was it just?
That doesn't
Yeah.
So the panel doesn't happen until you get to the final round.
Mm-hmm.
So usually the first two rounds are with one individual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the first interview was with one of the team members. The second interview was with the hiring manager. And if the hiring manager really likes what he hears, then you will get invited to a panel, and they call it a loop. Um, and in that loop, you have approximately like 5 or 6 different people that you interview with, each of whom will ask you a series of questions, you know, 4 or 5,
Mm-hmm.
and they take notes. And then
And this is all happening virtually, right?
it happened virtually for me. Typically, you would go on site, and they would basically, it would be one interview after the other with maybe like a few minutes of breaks in between and a 1 hour lunch break. But it was an all day event for me. It was tiring towards the end,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, they asked me over 30 questions,
Oh my gosh.
dealing with different, you know, the different
Scenarios.
leadership principles. Yeah, different leadership principles. And then they typically have somebody that they call the bar raiser. Usually this person will ask you more tougher questions, and they just want to see how you react. Um, and then I had to do a writing sample as well, which I didn't even know I had to, but it was required for the role. And they just want to see how your writing skills are, and because writing is a very critical thing within Amazon. That's how you get things approved at the higher levels, from what I was told. Um, Amazon is a company that doesn't really use PowerPoint, from what I found out.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I had read somewhere, but I'm not sure if it was Amazon, that it always communicated with memos, written memos from
That's,
leadership. Is
yeah,
that Amazon? Do I recall? Okay. Yeah.
yeah, they call them white papers, but yes. Yeah, so essentially, for as part of my interview, I had to write a white paper on, and they give you the prompt. Can't recall what it was, but yeah, it's a something that you've done, and you just write about it, and then you just have to be able to, you know, defend a thesis and support it with examples.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how did the process work for that? Like, were you given the prompt and the assignment in advance and then
Yeah.
sort of emailed? Okay.
Yeah, so I had about a week, roughly. Yeah, about a week to
Okay.
put it
To turn it
together.
in. Okay.
And yeah, and you know, for me, like not having done that before, it was kind of daunting because I'm like, well, I don't know if the structure I picked is going to align with what they want to see, but I mean, I did my best.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
How was it different from your interviews with Boeing?
Oh, I mean, Boeing only asked me
AMC probably.
they asked me three questions and that's it. Like,
Mhm.
it was, I mean, they're behavioral questions. And I think it all boils down to if the manager likes you or not, and if you would be a good fit. Because I remember interviewing with Boeing in 2008, and I just told them what I wanted to do. And
Mhm.
I happened to talk to the right manager. I had networked with him, not knowing he was scouting for people. And, I
Mhm.
would say first impressions go a long way.
I heard just actually read about it from, I think it was ZipRecruiter's CEO that said that in a video interview, it's really, you have 2 seconds to set that first impression.
Yeah, you really
And it
do.
really sets the tone for the
Mhm.
entire conversation.
Yeah, and I would say like for me, because I did my interviews virtually, I felt like the tone in my voice was very important because that shows confidence.
Mhm.
Um, that really helped me a lot, and I felt like just practicing interviewing, the types of questions Amazon could ask me
Sure.
was very critical. Just because technology sector is very different. They could ask you some off the wall question, and if you don't know how to answer it, you could really put yourself in a pickle, and then that's when you start losing credibility in your response.
Absolutely. And how long after the final interview did you get the offer and how was it delivered?
Well, so to be honest with you, after the last interview, I didn't even know how I did, but there was one hint of confidence in that I saw in one of the folks that interviewed me, where she kept complimenting my responses and telling me how good of an example that was. So that sort of kind of gave me a level of confidence, but it took about almost a month, like where I didn't hear anything. Yeah,
Mhm.
a little over 3 weeks. And I actually reached out to them because I hadn't heard anything. And I said, can you let me know what the next steps are? Uh, and then they called me one day and they said, we'd like to make you an offer. You've made it to the offer stage. I'm going to send this to you via email. This is
Mhm.
what the base salary is what your bonus is, how much stock you'll get and vacation, and I'll send you information about your benefits. So when they sent that to me, that was, I think, the next day or something like that. I told them I wanted a few days to kind of think it over. And that's where I started talking to some friends and, the university about how do I negotiate a
Mhm.
salary? How do I know if I am getting paid fairly based
Mhm.
on the current market rate?
Mhm.
Turned out uh, me countering their first offer actually helped me get a little bit more. I didn't even know that was possible. And so just learning like where you are uh,
Mhm.
in terms of salary scale, like if you're either on the low, medium, or the high end of the level you're interviewing for, that can kind of tell you how far the company's willing to push more money your way. Um, so for me, I interviewed for a higher level position. I ended up getting one lower level, which is fine given the technical requirements the team has. And so I knew I was at a disadvantage there. But the fact that they gave me that offer and I was able to counter, and they came back even stronger in their final offer to me, was a
Mhm.
blessing. I was shocked that the amount that they offered, um, and I was just happy that you know I was gonna have a new job soon. I was gonna have to go through the screening process that they go through, and that took a few weeks. But from the
Mhm.
moment you accept the offer to the moment you start the new job, I mean, it's roughly 4 weeks from acceptance of offer.
Okay. So for those out there, it's really, really important to, I guess, focus that salary negotiation on what are the most flexible components of it just to maximize that offer. That's really, really useful to know. So what are you most excited about working for Amazon?
I mean, for me, it's just learning something new.
Hmm.
Amazon Web Services is a growing business. It's their bread and butter, as I would call it. And for me, is just coming in with a fresh perspective on things and just seeing how they do business in that division is going to be huge for me. I mean, I really like the culture. Uh, you
Hmm.
know, the energy. I mean, there's a lot of smart people at the company, and one of the first things my manager told me in our first one-on-one is says, look, feel free to ask any question you want. There's no such thing as a dumb question. He's
Hmm.
like, you're coming from a different industry. You're gonna have a lot of questions, so have your
Fire them away.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, ask away. And so for me, like that right there was kind of a blessing. And then the fact that the manager has a lot of confidence in me was huge. So that got me even more excited because that was a behavior I didn't really see at Boeing, especially in the current time and situations they're facing today.
Where you need that motivation and encouragement even more, right?
Yeah, yeah. So comparing and contrasting the employee morale at Boeing versus Amazon, I knew that I had made the right decision, that it came to the right department,
Mm-hmm.
because in that department, I'm going to be able to leverage a lot of the procurement skills I obtained at Boeing, um,
Hmm.
and I'm going to learn, data analytics, which is something I've never really done before. So that's going to set me up for the future.
Hmm. And that's really encouraging to know in and of itself as well that you really don't need to meet a job's requirements 100%, right? As long
Hmm.
as you have that potential, um,
Right.
interests, motivation, and
Hmm.
maybe, I don't know, 70, 80% of
Yeah.
qualifications listed, you're good to go. You have a chance, right?
Yep. Yeah. And then, the other thing that really helped me a lot is just being like, and I think I said this earlier in the interview, is just being honest,
Hmm.
because I was transparent from day one about, some of the technical skills I lacked for the role, but I leveraged a lot of the things I had done and I gave them examples of key things I had to learn in my prior job. And so I said, if I can do that, I'll be able to learn this in this role.
100%. And what is just to sort of on a final note, what does a typical day look like for you, especially during during this pandemic period?
So for me, my manager wrote a launch plan. So basically, it's like an onboarding plan
Mhm.
of key people I need to meet, key trainings I need to do, and also job shadow the person I'm taking work from. So that's been taking up a lot of my time, and just learning, the different places to go, to set up payroll, to get access to certain databases. So that's been taking up a lot of my time.
Mhm.
Haven't really had to do a lot of my day-to-day job yet because I'm still new and learning, but eventually that's going to change. And so right now I'm just trying to soak up all of the information that they're throwing at me. I feel like I'm back in college again, learning something new. So that to me is kind of rewarding. The fact that I'm learning something new, I'm learning a new business,
Yeah, you're
the
able to really
company
stretch
culture.
yourself, yeah, personally and professionally.
Exactly.
Well, Frank, any last thoughts, remarks you'd like to share?
I would say be persistent. Um, you know, Changing jobs during a pandemic felt like it was going to be an impossible task for me. One of the things I learned in my journey is that the job market is actually a lot hotter than you think. I feel like a lot of companies are reevaluating some of the resources that they have or don't have. Uh, Folks with a supply chain background can actually leverage what's happening today in the job market, because a lot of companies that, let's say, that needed to provide PPE equipment uh, didn't have the right protocols in place to support the demand. And so they're looking for people with supply chain backgrounds. And so I felt like that was a good opportunity for me. I mean, I'm not saying supply chain is the only area, but I mean, you have folks that are retiring, you have organizations that are getting smaller, and companies are trying to figure out ways to recruit and retain top talent. So as long as you're able to leverage your resume, leverage your background, I think you should be in a good place to be able to switch jobs at any time during your career, whether you're in a pandemic or not.
Frank, thank you so much. I mean,
Mhm,
this is just such it's invaluable information for all
mhm,
those out there, particularly ours, recent graduates in our alumni and career transition.
mhm,
So we're
mhm.
grateful for your time.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
for those of you who would like to reach out to Frank directly, he is available as a alumni volunteer on our team networking platform. So you're more than welcome to reach out to him.
Yeah,
Frank,
thank
thank
you.
you again.
Mhm. Okay, bye-bye.